Reddit. What is your most disturbing, scary, or creepy real story? Finding a dead body. A few years ago, I was walking through the woods off the beaten track a bit, and I smelled this really overpowering sweet smell. Being nosy, I pulled back the undergrowth to have a look and found a dead body. The guy had clearly been there a while and wasn't looking great, all swollen and green and black with the various running bits. The local wildlife had also been dining well for a few days. I called the police, who found me to wait with the body until they arrived. Being in the middle of nowhere, it took a while for them to arrive, and then it got dark, and I was just sat there in the dark with him for a long time. It turned out he had committed suicide. For a long time afterwards, I had dreams about him, and he would talk to me and not nice things. Mainly how he was angry I had disturbed his resting place, and he wanted me to kill myself. Probably just my imagination, but all pretty disturbing at the same time. He still turns up in my dreams from time to time, and no doubt will be tonight after typing this. Holy shit! Smelled sweet. Difficult to describe. Sort of like rotting lamb. People say that rotting body has a very distinctive smell, and I can see what they mean.
I used to do suicide and murder cleanup. The thing that gets you about it is the smell. It's not that it's that bad. It's just that it's not as revolting as you would expect. That makes it worse. That sickly sweet aroma of a dead human.
Sleeping in the car on a highway. About 2 years ago, I was driving home from a family reunion pretty late at night. And the drive was about 2 hours. I didn't stay the night because I had to be back for work the following day. Most of the drive was on the roads with dense bushes and trees on either side. The real creepy ones you see a lot in movies. Anyway, I'd been driving about 45 minutes, and I was starting to get really tired. You know how sometimes you just suddenly became really tired out of nowhere? Well, yeah, that happened to me. I knew I wasn't going to last, but I didn't come across any place that I felt I could park and safely sleep. Anyway, after it became clear to me that I wasn't going to find a place to pull up, and my tiredness wasn't going away, I did something very questionable. I pulled over to the side of the road onto the grass, behind some bushes, to try and hide my car from anyone else who was going on to come past. The roads weren't empty. I came across another car every few minutes or so. I made a mental note that the time was 11:22, and then fell asleep. Sometime later, I was awoken by a scratching sound. I looked at the clock, 11:50. The sound stopped after a few seconds. And because I was still extremely tired, I didn't bother looking around and simply went back to sleep. I was later woken by the same sound, and it was now 12:40. This time, it really freaked me out, because the sound didn't stop. The thought ran across my mind that it was just an animal inspecting the car. But why would it return almost an hour after I had left the previous time? I looked in my rear view mirror and just managed to catch a glimpse of something running away into the forest. Now, at the time, I thought it was a damn hook killer. You know, the one who scratched the couple's car and then slaughtered the guy when he got out to investigate? Fuck that. So, I got the hell out of there. There was a bend no more than 100 yards up the road, and as I came around it, there was a fucking car,
parked off to the side of the road with the driver's side door opened. I slowed down just to look to see if anyone's there. There wasn't. Then I looked at my rear view mirror. I didn't see anything. And all of a sudden, this guy comes sprinting around the corner. He starts screaming at me, shouting stuff like, "Hey! Hey, you! Get the fuck out of your car! Now!" I knocked the fuck out of there and sped off. I never saw the guy again. Moral of the story? Don't fucking sleep on the side of the deserted road. Creepy pedestrian. A few summers ago, I went on for a bike ride around midnight with a friend. We went our separate ways at the end of the evening, and I had about 2 blocks to ride back by myself. Because of construction, I had to ride on the sidewalk, but the streets were dead, but it wasn't a problem until right where I was about to turn left on my street. There was this man walking by himself. Maybe 40s, a little scruffy, but not homeless. The sidewalk was narrow, and I didn't want to freak him out, so I went about 6 feet behind him, and I said, "Hey, behind you." And he turned around and gave me this super angry look. I turned down my streets and started to follow me. Literally screaming about how I was fucking cunt and he was going to kill me and all that. I live right off the corner and I didn't want him to figure out, so I decided to do another loop around the block. That's not the scary part. The scary part is when I looped back around and looked down the street, I saw him standing on my fucking front stoop, staring out of the street like the motherfucker knew I lived there. Here, he saw me ride by again, and he didn't say anything. I ended up going back to the friends, but my bike got stolen from the alleyway by the house 2 days later. Edit. The guy in question was definitely not actually homeless. We have a large population of mentally ill in the area, unfortunately. Downtown of a medium-sized city. So, if I didn't think the sidewalk was too narrow to pass, otherwise I wouldn't have disturbed him. Half the scary part was he looked pretty much completely normal for my area. That being said, I ended up texting my mom and she made the decision not to notify law enforcement until my bike was stolen. Someone in your apartment. So, I was sleeping, and in the middle of the dream, a character of my dream, who was doing something, turned her head, looked at me very seriously, and said, "There's someone in your apartment. Wake up!" I nearly had a goddamn heart attack, and my apartment was empty. A man outside the window. I had awesome parents who let me sleep in the living room on the weekend nights when I was very young, because my sister was a light sleeper and I could stay up till dawn. But of course, I always end up sleeping on the couch because Nick at Night made me tired. So, one night, I wake up to the pricky feeling, like an instinct. Just jolted into a sitting position and stared out of the front window. We lived in the rural Georgia, so you can imagine the magnitude of trees. In perfect light cast from the moon, I see a silhouette of someone in this fucking tree. The family dog dashes into the window and is snarling into the glass. Terrified, I run to my parents' room and try to explain to my parents that there was a strange person outside. Dad grabs something defensive and darts outside with the dogs to beat up wax off the hot head. I tremble in Mama's arms until Dad comes home and says he saw no one and to go to bed. I decide to sleep in my regular bedroom. I fill in my sister in as to what happened. Dad is making regular rounds in the house with a cup of coffee. We're all still and I finally think I can sleep. Nope, I notice the man outside my window. From what I can see in the moonlight, he gives me a harsh signal and runs away. Just turns around to run a straight line away. I swear, I couldn't stop crying for what felt like hours. Drowning. When I was a young child, I had the same dream every night for years about drowning, when a huge wave swept over me and I sank to the bottom. Years later, I had a tramp job delivering mail one summer during college. I saw this old lady sitting on a front porch waiting for me. When I got up there, she looked at me and said in a foreign accent, "You drowned when Oceana sank beneath the waves." Freaked me out. Abandoned house. I was 17 and had just gotten my license. Back in high school, my friends and I made a mission to find abandoned houses to throw parties in. We had a few good candidates, but the motherlode was this house I would pass on my home from work. It was an undeveloped shell of a huge home with large property in the back. I had told one of my friends about it, and the day before we went to see a movie, I took him to the house. It was about dusk in summer, so I had my headlights on. I pulled into the front of the house, and we were there like 10 seconds tops before we pulled back to go to the main road. A minute later, this big truck pulls behind us with the high beams on and running our ass. My friend and I took note of it, but paid it no mind as we headed back to the main road. At the light, I turned right, but the truck cut through the gas station at the corner and blocked us off. Out of this truck comes this big hulk of a man, and my friend and I were shitting our pants. He raps on the window and I roll it down. Now, the really freaky part is that this busy road, and now there was no one in sight. He asks us what we were doing at the house, and I quickly lied and said we were making a U-turn. He stares at us for a few seconds, smiles, and sends us on our way. To this day, the house remains unfinished, and I'm convinced it's a drug operation of some sort. TLDR. Don't go into abandoned houses, man. What is some scary shit you've experienced? Elevator. I was about to go in the elevator, and when the door opened, there was a technician working inside. I stopped and turned around to walk down the stairs, but the technician told me he was finishing up and it was okay to use the elevator. When I got on and pressed first, the elevator dropped like an inch before the door even closing. I stood there, frozen, looking at the technician to reassure me. He just casually said, "That's not supposed to happen," and slipped out as the door closed, leaving me behind. The elevator worked fine, but that shit was not cool.
This is so funny, though, and I am sorry, but I'm dying.
I think this technician belongs in r/found Satan. Hospital. I woke up in a hospital bed with a respirator, my arms tied down, and no idea how I got there. That's something straight out of Hollywood, like Liam Neeson unknown. Bystanders. One scary thing for me was finally experiencing the bystander effect. People would turn a blind eye because they don't want to get involved, even if something very wrong was happening. A man pinned me to the floor by my arms and was on the top of me in a very public space. Was trying to kiss me? I was telling him to let me go, and I tried to kick him off, and everyone just kept walking. Ted Bundy. Once, when I was very young, I locked myself out of my apartment. Car keys were inside, and it was snowing very hard. As I was walking to my workplace about 2 miles away, a man stopped and offered me a ride. He got out and opened the door for me, and I got in.
Once inside, I realized he had removed the door handle and I couldn't open it from the inside. He also had a bottle of vodka open and was drinking it like water, and a few other empties in the floorboard. I was scared to death, but he took me straight to the place I asked to go and dropped me right off.
Jesus, you got very lucky. That's terrifying.
Damn, that sounds like Ted Bundy. He removed the door handles from his car to prevent victims from escaping. He also had a habit of drinking while pounding to reduce inhibitions. Scary.
Car accident. My brother was hit by a car directly next to me when we were 6. He died on impact, and I was sideswiped so hard and fast that I spun around and lived with only scrapes on grass stains. I still have a little scar on my knee. If I had been walking on the gravel instead of the grass, I would have been the one that died. Photographer. I posted about this man years ago under a different account on Let's Not Meet. It got some attention, which makes me scared that he will find it, so I'm posting this minor update here instead because I love this channel. Backstory. You may be able to find the original post, but I don't remember my account name at the time. When I was 13, I made a profile on the amateur modeling website and posted photos of myself. This was back in the early 2010s, so there weren't really warnings, age restrictions, or parental awareness about the dangers of the internet. I had never intended to meet up with a photographer, but I would get messages sometimes from people asking if I wanted to do a photo shoot. This one photographer, I'll call him B, was pretty persistent about trying to schedule a photo shoot. He was probably in his 30s or 40s at the time and may have offered to fly me out to him, but I do not remember specifics. This was 18 years ago. I'm so old. I obviously never went, and eventually just stopped using the site and forgot about it. Years later, in my late teens and on Facebook, and I got a message from him asking if I remembered him. He had something like,
Remember how we were going to do a photo shoot, and I warned you about the dangers of meeting men online?
I blocked him and didn't think about it again. Many years later, I'm in my mid-20s, and he adds me on Instagram and messages me, asking if I remember him. I ignored it and blocked him again. The messages were infrequent, but at this point it has been 12 years since he found my profile and messaged me at 13 years old, so that level of persistence thoroughly creeped me out. Fast forward to the present day. I had the same Twitter account for like 16 years, and it doesn't have my last name, but it has my first name. I have 250 followers on Twitter at the time. I was pretty engaged in a lot of communities, so when someone with a profile picture of a woman followed me and replied to some of my tweets, I didn't think too much about it. However, a few weeks later, they sent me a direct message that said thoroughly, "You're very beautiful. I'm sure you know that, though." At this point, I still thought they were a woman. So I just saw it was a nice compliment and replied, "Thank you." They responded with, "You're welcome." Then it got suspicious. I think it will be okay to add screenshots if anyone's curious, but I'll just paraphrase the rest for now. B. Have you ever modeled? You'll be great at it. Me? No. But thank you. B. That's a shame. B. Have you ever spoken to a photographer about modeling? Me? Getting suspicious. Not really. B. Oh, I'm surprised. Did you have a profile on any modeling websites? At this point, I thoroughly weirded out. Sure, this person is not a woman, and think it's highly likely they're the same photographer who found me online at that point, 17 years ago. I stopped responding altogether, but I didn't block them. I want to keep an eye on them because this level of persistence scares the shit out of me. For the past 8 months, they've been messaging me regularly, and I never respond. The message includes, "Can I ask you a question?" "Aw, I scared you off." "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable." "I hope I didn't scare you off." "I have a question if you don't mind." ETC. I got a message today. Hope I can ask you a question one day. It makes me kinda nauseous. Do all y'all think it's the same guy, or am I paranoid? What would you do? Sorry this story is disjointed. It's so weird that I don't really know how to tell it.